Permit me to introduce this man. His name is Mr. Kicks. He dwells in a dark dominion way down by the river Styx. The devil sent him here because he's full of wicked tricks, and he's such a popular fellow among all you lunatics. He'll teach a course in ruination from the devil's text. To fools who can't withstand temptation, step right up your next. He hails from a hot-old hellhole down along the river Styx. Permit me to introduce this man. His name is Mr. Kicks. When an old wolf starts to prowling out among the young lambs howling, don't you know he's looking for kicks? When a young cat full of sly tricks spends his evenings chasing fly chicks, 10 to 1 he is looking for kicks. Kicks is always in demand because Kicks is full of fun and laughter. Lots of folks get out of hand because it's only Kicks they're after. Shady lady and a lover out parading undercover. She knows sin and virtue don't mix. Mama raised a prim and proper, but now what horses couldn't stop her when she's on a manhunt for kicks. Kicks, nothing but kicks, just kicks, nothing but kicks. Mr. Kicks.
Our guest for today is an American jazz recording artist. She has a voice that has been described as being a voice from heaven. She is at the pinnacle of her career with the release of her new album, Round Midnight Reimagined. She has performed for over 30 years at clubs and venues throughout Southern California, as well as special events and festivals in New York and Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. I would like to welcome to the show Miss Amber Weeks.
Hi, Mark. I'm great. It's great to connect with you. I'm doing well despite what we find ourselves in.
I am just, first of all, I have to say, I am so, I don't know if enthralled is the right word or amazed. I just think you are amazing because I remember seeing you, good Lord, maybe 20, 30 years ago at this club in Century City.
Yes.
And you are still doing it. You have never stopped.
Yeah.
And that is just very impressive to me. And like I said, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you're pretty much at the top of your career right now. I mean, I'm hearing you all the time on K-Jazz. You're getting played with people like Miles Davis and Oscar Peterson and Ella Fitzgerald. That is quite impressive. Did you know, at what age did you know you wanted to make your living as a singer?
Well, my whole life. Somewhere there was a picture of me. I have a feeling over the years it's gotten misplaced. But my mother took a picture of me and my sister Dawn standing on our coffee table. And, we're both singing, but, I was always the one out front, So I was about 4. So I think my whole life, I knew that this was what I was destined to do. And I've continued to do it all of this time. Certainly done other things in my life, but consistently have always sung and just was determined that this was going to be how I lived my life. And so that's what I'm doing. And yes, I'm absolutely thrilled to be, to have my music played on the radio and starting to sort of prepare for touring whenever touring happens. And it's quite validating. It really is. And I'm honored that stations not only across the country, but across the world like my work enough that I'm getting airplay. It's really exciting. It's really exciting. I've always been around music. Both of my parents sang. My mother was more of like a classically trained soprano, and she was, until she had my sisters and me, she was a choir soloist in church. And then my father also was a soloist in church, but Daddy actually sang in nightclubs in New York, and also while he was in the service during the Korean War. And he was a big Frank Sinatra clone. And in addition to that, my parents' friends were all audiophiles, if not musicians. And so I was always around it and always wanted to be part of it. And so even as a little girl,
Can you tell us something about your connection to New York and most particularly Harlem?
Sure. That's easy. Both of my parents actually grew up in Harlem. My father was born and raised in Harlem. And my mother immigrated from Jamaica after World War II. And so from the time she was 8, she was raised in Harlem. So, both sides of my family, big ties to Harlem. My father, a little bit more so. My mother's childhood was very, very sheltered. My great grandparents were very protective of her. But Daddy, on the other hand, and I think part of it too was he was a boy. But in addition to that, my grandparents, Nettie and Wilfred Weeks, owned Weeks's Luncheonette, which was at the corner of 155th and St. Nicholas Avenue in the Sugar Hill area of New York, or of Harlem. And so in the diner, which was like a lunch counter, but it was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was around the corner from where Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, Billy Strayhorn, and a lot of other folks, Sonny Rollins, and some others right now I can't recall, lived close to the Luncheonette and frequented it a lot. In addition, Diane Carroll came through when my grandparents had a candy store before it was a luncheonette, and she used to buy candy in the candy store.
And she was also one of your musical inspirations as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Diane Carroll.
Yes, she sure was. There's no question about that. So my father told us a lot of stories about what Harlem was like. And I was fortunate enough, when I was first born, we actually lived in an apartment building, and 2 of the 4 units were occupied by friends of my father from New York. And so it was kind of like I grew up in Harlem. I was born into Harlem. And the artistic expression and the history of that very important place in American history. But my father repeatedly told me a very amusing story, because unlike California, Los Angeles is becoming more like New York in that we're getting a lot of mixed use spaces. But in New York, mixed use spaces have been, the way of the world forever. And so, for instance, where the Luncheonette was, there were apartments above it. So Count Basie's band came in one night, and another band, and I don't remember who the leader was, and the jukebox was playing, and the band members were going back and forth about what instrument was playing the solo. And it was the middle of the night, and my father worked the overnight shift at the Luncheonette, and Daddy said that one musician played the solo on whatever was a clarinet or saxophone, and then the guy from the other band played it on the saxophone, And they went back and forth, and then everybody pulled out their instruments, and they had one big jam session. And the cop came in. It was like 2 a.m. And the cop looked at my father and said, "Marty, this is ridiculous. You have 2 hours to knock it off." You know, but the music, Daddy said the music was just so great that the cop didn't have the heart to stop them, though it was keeping people awake upstairs.
That's a great story. What a different time.
Harlem was such an important piece of the tapestry of my history. And my father died almost 5 years ago. And so the album I released this year around Midnight Reimagined was a celebration of the stories my father told. And so I framed it as like a series of vignettes of different characters during a summer night in Harlem. And the album actually starts with the tune Hazel's Hips, which is a song about a waitress, and it's my tribute to my grandparents' diner. It's also a celebration of the romance between my Aunt Dolores and Sidney Poitier, who was a patron of the restaurant. And he met my Aunt Dolores while she was a student at Hunter College. And they dated and were engaged. And my grandmother was very concerned that my aunt would be supporting some unknown actor. And she did everything she could to tear up the relationship. So they didn't get married. Otherwise, I'd be telling you that Sidney Poitier was my uncle. But they remained friends until my aunt died.
Well, that's a great story.
He describes the relationship pretty thoroughly in his book, This Life, the first memoir that he did.